Hey, it's Keisha. Welcome and welcome back. On our next reading in the Aquarian, we're looking at chapters 131 and 132. So let's begin by first taking a moment to center ourselves. So just close your eyes and take a deep breath in and let it out. Another deep breath in and out. Feel your energy begin to center and calm. Just begin to collect yourself in this space, becoming more and more present in this moment. With each breath, gently release the thoughts and the cares and worries of the day. Release the thoughts and cares and worries about tomorrow. Release the thoughts, cares, and worries about the past. Feeling yourself more present and coming into now. Gently and lovingly recall all of your power back to yourself. If you feel like you're still attached to anything, gently release those attachments and let them return back to source. If you feel like anything is attached or corded to you, just let it release and go back to source. We should now feel ourselves present, whole, and free. Breathe that in. You now gently see a column of light coming down over you. This white golden light surrounding you, filling you up, filling in all the spaces between the cells, quickening the mind, enlivening the heart. And breathe that in. Now we'll lift up gently in that column of light, higher and higher, lifting up to our familiar space of peace and oneness, of love and light, of right thought and right action. When you come to a comfortable space, feel your mind open and receptive. Feel your heart open and receptive. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. I didn't want to be ready. Oh, chapter 131. As Jesus and the 12 were resting in the house, the tax collector came to Peter saying, "Man, do Jesus and yourself pay this half shekel tax?" And Peter said, We pay whatever is assessed." And Jesus said, "From whom do the publicans collect this special tax? From strangers or from native sons?" And Peter said, "The strangers are only supposed to pay this tax." And then Jesus said, "We are all native sons and we are free. But lest we cause contention, we will pay the tax." But neither had the shekel wherewithal to pay. And Jesus said, "Go to the sea, cast a hook, and catch a fish. And you will find within its inner parts a shekel, which take up and pay the tax for you and me." And Peter did as Jesus said, and he found the shekel and he paid the tax. Now Jesus heard the 12 dispute among themselves. The spirit of the carnal self was moving in their hearts, and they were questioning among themselves, who is the greatest in the sight of God and man. And Jesus said, "You men, for shame. The greatest is the servant of the rest." And then he called to him a little child. He took him in his arms and he said, "The greatest is the little child. And if you would be great at all, you must become as this child in innocence, in truth, and in purity, and in life. Great men scorn not the little things of earth. He who regards and honors such a child regards and honors me. And he who scorns a child scorns me. If you would enter through the kingdom gate, you must be humble as this little child. Hear me, you men. This child, as every other child, has one to plead its cause before the throne of God. You scorn it at your peril, men, for lo, I say, its counterpart beholds the face of God at every moment, every day. And hear me once again. He who shall cause a little one to stumble and to fall is marked accursed, and it were far better that he had drowned himself. Behold, offenses everywhere. Men find occasion for to sin and fall, and they grow strong by rising when they fall. But woe to him who causes other men to stumble and to fall. Be on your guard, you men of God, lest you constrain another man to fall. Beware lest you fall into sinful ways yourselves. Now, if your hands cause you to sin, you better cut them off. For it far better to have no hands and not be guilty in the sight of God and man, than to be perfect in your form and lose your soul. And if your feet should cause offense, you better cut them off. For it is better far to enter into life without your feet than fall beneath the curse. And if your eyes or ears cause you to sin, you better lose them all than lose their mind. Your thoughts and words and deeds will all be tried by fire. Remember that you are the salt of the earth. But if you lose the virtues of the salt, you are but refuse in the sight of God. Retain the virtues of the salt of life and be at peace among yourselves. The world is full of men who have not in themselves the salt of life, and they are lost. I come to seek and save the lost. How think you, if a shepherd have 100 sheep, and one of them is gone astray, will he not leave the 99 and go out in the desert ways and the mountaintops to seek the one that went astray? Yes, this you know. And if he finds the one that went astray, lo, he is glad, and he rejoices over it far more than all the 99 that did not go astray. And so there is rejoicing in the courts of heaven when one of human birth who has gone forth into the ways of sin is found and brought back to the fold. Yea, there is joy, more joy than over all the righteous men who never went astray. And John said, Master, who may seek and save the lost? And who may heal the sick and cast the demons out of the obsessed? When we were on the way, we saw a man who was not one of us cast demons out and heal the sick. He did it by the sacred word and in the name of Christ. But we forbade him, for he did not walk with us. And Jesus said, You sons of men, do you imagine that you own the powers of God? And do you think that all the world must wait for you to do the works of God? God is not a man that he should have a special care for any man and give him special gifts. Forbid not any man to do the works of God. There is no man who can pronounce the sacred word and in the name of Christ restore the sick and cast the unclean spirits out, who is not a child of God. The man of whom you speak is one of us, Whoever gathers in the grain of heaven is one of us. Whoever gives up a cup of water in the name of Christ is one of us. So shall God judge. A multitude of people thronged the streets. The officers were on the way to court with one, a man accused of stealing bread. And in a little while, the man was brought before the judge to answer to the charge. And Jesus and the 12 were there. The man showed in his face and in his hands the hard-drawn lines of toil and want. A woman richly clad, the accuser of the man, stood forth and said, I caught this man myself. I know him well, for yesterday he came to beg for bread. And when I drove him from my door, he should have known that I would harbor not a man like him. And then today he came back and took the bread. He is a thief, and I demand that he be sent to jail. The servants also testified against the man. He was adjudged a thief, and officers were leading him away. But Jesus, standing forth, exclaimed, You officers and judge, be not in haste to lead this man away. Is this the land of justice and right? Can you accuse and sentence men to punishment for any crime until they testify themselves? The Roman law will not permit such a travesty on right. And I demand that you permit this man to speak. And then the judge recalled that man and said, If you have any tale to tell, say on. In tears, the man stood forth and said, I have a wife and little ones, and they are perishing for bread. And I have told my story oft and begged for bread, but none would hear. This morning, when I left our cheerless hut in search of work, my children cried for bread, and I resolved to feed them or to die. I took the bread, and I appealed to God. Was it a crime? This woman snatched the loaf away and threw it to the dogs and called the officers, and I am here. Good people, do with me whatever you will, but save my wife and little ones from death. Then Jesus said, Who is the culprit in this case? I charge this woman as a felon in the sight of God. I charge this judge as criminal before the bar of human rights. I charge these servants and these officers as party to the crime. I charge the people of Capernaum with cruelty and theft, because they heeded not the cries of poverty and want, and have withheld from helpless ones that which is theirs by law and every right. And I appeal unto those people here and ask, Are not my charges based on righteousness and truth? And every man said yes. The accusing woman blushed for shame. The judge shrank back in fear. The officers threw off the shackles from the man and ran away. Then Jesus said, Give this man what he needs and let him go and feed his wife and little ones. The people gave abundantly. The man went on his way. And Jesus said, There is no standard law to judge a crime. There is no standard law to judge of crime. The facts must all be stated ere a judgment can be rendered in a case. You men with hearts, go forth and stand where this man stood and answer me. What would you do? The thief thinks every other man a thief and judges him accordingly. The man who judges harshly is the man whose heart is full of crime. The courtesan who keeps her wickedness concealed by what she calls respectability has not a word of pity for the honest courtesan who claims to be just what she is. I tell you, men, if you would censure not till you are free from sin, the world would soon forget the meaning of the word accused. For as many times as I have read this book and know these stories, I'm always struck by how each successive reading reveals a deeper meaning or applies differently based on whatever's happening. And it's interesting because, this was written, 1911, I think. And the story, of course, is much older than that. But it really is the story of the human condition. And, we start this section with, I'll come back to Peter and needing to pay the taxes. But, when Jesus comes across the 12 and they're arguing amongst themselves about, who is the greatest, that is such, people have been doing that time immemorial. They're always trying to rank people themselves or whatever. And, I watch a lot of, sports TV, sports radio kind of thing, podcasts. And it's always a question of who's the greatest, as if you can't appreciate all of those who have played the game for, the skill that they've brought, or those magical moments of sport that they've shared with us. And it's like we always have to judge and rank. And it's always a dispute, and there's always anchor and rancor, and maybe that's just something to talk about. But this constant need to compare, and the constant need to compare means that there's constant judgment. And all of Jesus's teachings to this point is, judge not that you be judged. That we are not in a place to judge. And even though the disciples, have been with him in close quarters for 2.5 years at this point, they still engage in these very common, carnal activities, base and basic activities. And I think I probably say that every video, but it's true, because they just keep doing it. And it's like they don't get the message. And even later on, when they see somebody else who hasn't walked with Jesus, they're like, but he wasn't one of us, but he was healing. And Jesus has to tell them, anyone who can give the prayer and say the word of God is of God and walks with us, whether or not we are aware of them. By virtue of the fact that he was healing people and casting out the spirits is the sign that he's one of God. It doesn't matter that we know him as someone who's walked with us and where we have been, because God's favor is there for all, and we can all partake in it and all be conduits of it. Okay, so going back to Peter and the need to pay the taxes. So basically what's happened is the tax collectors come to them and ask that they pay the taxes. But it's one of those things where only foreigners should be paying the taxes. And both Jesus and Peter are citizens. So they shouldn't. But Jesus says, look, our mere presence already causes so much consternation. Let's just go ahead and pay the taxes so that we don't have to deal with that too. And then Peter says, well, we don't have it, we don't have it. And Jesus, in the way that he's taught them already to manifest, instantly says, go down to the sea, and, cast a hook. So go down to the sea, go down to a place apart, right? And cast your idea into the ethers and see what comes up and what comes back to you, because your word does not come back to you void. It comes back to you as the fish, and and there you will find the shekel or the coin to pay the taxes. So there you will, you cast your idea out into the ethers, and what comes back to you is the idea that allows you to move forward. And what else did we have that I thought was interesting in this section? A lot of good poetry, but I think that's always the case, whether or not I point it out. So there was a part that caused me to smile when Jesus talks about the thief thinks every other man a thief and judges him accordingly. A saying that I have said forever that speaks to that is, people will assume of you what people will assume of you what they know to be true for themselves. And so when you come across someone who is accusing you of something, and you know that you didn't do it, in your heart that's not you, that's information that they are giving you about them, because they can't come to that conclusion unless it's something within their consciousness that they wholly are aware of and understand. And they can only wholly be aware of it and understand it if it's part of their consciousness and part of who they are. So, I'll say that again. people will always assume of you what they know to be true for themselves. And so, here they have, the man's being judged for being a thief by this wealthy woman, and even the servants who, everybody's jockeying for position. So if the man is so wretched that he's a thief, even though the people that are judging him are just servants, they still see themselves as better than him. And so they're quick to point the finger and judge. And Jesus is rebuked to all of them, the woman, the servants, the judges, and the officers of the court, is if you put yourself in his position where it's been many days and his family is starving, what would you do? And so, the real crime is that no one listened to his plea, and no one offered help, especially if the woman was going to take the bread from him and throw it to the dogs, right? You can't. None of us are in a position to judge anyone else because we don't know what they're going through, and we don't know all the conditions and pressures that they're under that would lead them to that particular act. And so it's not our place. It's not our place to judge. So we will come back to our reading in the next section. It'll be chapters 133 and 4, maybe even 135, depending on their relationship to each other, because I think Jesus is going to be teaching at the temple, and I might want to try to do all of those chapters together, though he spends quite a bit of time at the temple, so that might end up being like a 4-chapter read, which will be a little bit longer than we're usually used to. But such is how it should be. Perhaps we'll see. Well, until the next time, I love you. Bye then.